I never thought I'd live to see the day when the child I brought into this world, the boy I nursed through fevers, held through nightmares, and sacrificed everything for, would raise his hand against me. But that day came, and when it did, something inside me didn't shatter. It hardened, like steel forged in fire. They say a mother's love is unconditional, and maybe that's true. But respect has conditions. And my son was about to learn that the hard way. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked him in the eye and made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Welcome, my dear. This is Grandma Alice Stories, where every tale carries a lesson and every wound carries wisdom. Pull up a chair, pour yourself some tea, and settle in close, because today's story isn't easy to tell, but it needs to be told. Because sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. And sometimes, justice doesn't come with a gavel. It comes with a breakfast plate and a mother's quiet resolve. Let me take you back to where it all started. Not the day he hit me, but years before that, when things were still good between us. My son, Daniel, was my world. After his father passed when Daniel was only 12, it became just the two of us against everything. I worked double shifts at the diner, came home smelling like grease and coffee, and still managed to help him with his homework at the kitchen table. I wore the same 3 dresses for 5 years so he could have new school clothes. I skipped meals so his plate would be full. That's what mothers do. We give until there's nothing left, and then we find something more to give. Daniel grew up strong, handsome, and smart. Got himself a good job at a logistics company. Started making decent money. I was so proud. I thought I'd done right by him. Thought I'd raised a man who understood sacrifice, who valued hard work and loyalty. For a while I did. But then he met her. Vanessa. Oh, she was beautiful, I'll give her that. Tall, polished, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She worked in marketing, made more money than Daniel, and never let anyone forget it. The first time he brought her home for dinner, I cooked for hours. Made my famous pot roast, mashed potatoes from scratch, homemade apple pie. I wanted her to feel welcome, to see that our home, small as it was filled with love. She picked at her food like it was poisoned, smiled that tight, fake smile and said, "This is charming, Mrs. Hayes. So very rustic. Rustic. Like my life was some kind of antique shop curiosity." Daniel laughed it off, said she was just nervous. But I saw the way she looked around my home. At the worn couch I'd had since the 90s, the faded curtains I'd sewn myself, the chipped dishes that had fed my son for 20 years. She saw poverty. I saw memories. They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. She didn't want anything too traditional, she said. Translation. She didn't want her fancy friends seeing where Daniel came from. I smiled through it all, hugged her, welcomed her into our family. Because that's what you do. You make room for the people your children love, even when your gut tells you something's wrong. After the wedding, things changed fast. Daniel started visiting less. When he did come by, Vanessa was always too busy to join him. He'd sit at my kitchen table, distracted, checking his phone every 5 minutes. The conversations got shorter. The hugs got quicker. And slowly, painfully, I felt my son slipping away from me. Then came the money problems. Vanessa had expensive tastes, designer bags, luxury vacations, a new car every 2 years. Daniel tried to keep up, tried to give her the life she wanted. But it drained them. I could see it in his eyes, the stress wearing him down like sandpaper on wood. He started asking me for loans. Small amounts at first, 100 here, 200 there. I gave what I could. I was living on a fixed income, Social Security, and a small pension, but he was my son. Of course I helped. But the requests got bigger and more frequent. "Mom, we're behind on the mortgage. Mom, Vanessa's car needs repairs. Mom, just this once. I promise I'll pay you back." I gave until my savings account looked like a ghost town. Until I was choosing between my medications and his emergencies. And you know what? He never paid me back. Not once. And Vanessa? She kept posting photos online, fancy restaurants, spa days, shopping trips, while I was eating canned soup for dinner. I should have said no. Should have drawn a line. But mothers are fools when it comes to their children. We keep hoping they'll remember who we are, what we've done. We keep waiting for the gratitude we'll never receive. Then came last Thursday. Daniel showed up at my door unannounced, around 9 in the morning. I was surprised. He usually called first. But I smiled, opened the door wide, put the kettle on for tea. That's when I noticed his face. Red, tense, angry. Mom, I need $5,000. Just like that. No hello. No how are you. Just a demand. I set down the kettle slowly. Daniel, honey, I don't have that kind of money. Yes, you do. You've got savings. I had savings, I said quietly. I gave them to you, remember? His jaw tightened. This is important, Mom. Vanessa and I are in a bind. We need this. What kind of bind costs $5,000? He looked away. That's not your business. Not my business. The woman who'd raised him alone, who'd given him everything, wasn't entitled to know why he needed my last bit of security. I can't, I said. I'm sorry, Daniel, but I just can't. That's when his voice changed. Got low, cold. You know what your problem is, Mom? You've always been selfish. You act like you've sacrificed so much, but really you just want to control me. You want me to feel guilty forever. The words hit like fists. That's not true. It is true. He slammed his hand on the counter, making me jump. You guilt-trip me every time I visit. Oh, I worked so hard. Oh, I gave up so much. Well, guess what? I didn't ask you to do any of that. My heart was pounding. This wasn't my son. This was someone else. Someone shaped by bitterness and someone else's poison. Daniel, please. Just give me the money, Mom. I don't have it. He stepped closer. His face was red, his hands shaking. And then, in a moment I'll never forget, he raised his hand. Not to hit me. Not quite. But the gesture was there. The threat. The violence simmering just beneath the surface. I stood perfectly still. Looked him straight in the eye. And in that silence, something between us shattered like glass hitting concrete. He lowered his hand slowly. Backed away. Didn't apologize. Just turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there in my kitchen, alone, trembling. Not from fear, from heartbreak. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying every moment, every word. I thought about calling him, thought about forgiving him like I always did. But this time something was different, because I realized my son didn't respect me anymore. And if I didn't do something he'd never forget, I'd lose him forever. Not to distance, to entitlement. So I made a plan. The next morning, I woke up early, put on my apron, and started cooking his favorite breakfast. Because sometimes, love requires more than forgiveness. Sometimes it requires a lesson. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I'm a grandmother, and I don't do cold. I do breakfast hot, filling, and with a side of truth that burns going down. My son thought he could walk back into my home like nothing happened. Like raising his hand to me was just another Thursday morning argument we'd forget by Friday. But some things you don't forget. Some things you don't forgive until respect is earned back, one painful lesson at a time. I woke up that Friday morning at 5:30. Same as I had for 40 years. My hands still trembled slightly as I tied my apron. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Determination mixed with heartbreak. The kind of feeling that sits heavy in your chest and won't let you rest until you've set things right. I knew Daniel would come back. He always did. That was the pattern we'd fallen into over the years. He'd get angry, storm out, disappear for a day or two, then show up expecting everything to go back to normal. Expecting me to smooth things over, make his favorite meal, tell him it was okay. because that's what I'd always done. That's what mothers do. We absorb the pain, swallow the hurt, and pretend our hearts aren't breaking just to keep the peace. But not this time. This time, I was going to teach my son something his father should have taught him before cancer took him away. That respect isn't optional, and a mother's love, while deep, has boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. I started with the bacon. Thick cut, the way Daniel liked it since he was 8 years old. The smell filled the kitchen, mixed with fresh coffee brewing and the sound of eggs cracking into my cast iron skillet. I made his favorite over easy with the yolk still runny. Added hash browns, golden and crispy. Toast with real butter. Orange juice, freshly squeezed. It looked like forgiveness on a plate. But appearances can be deceiving. While the bacon sizzled, I pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared the night before. My hands had shaken then too, as I signed the papers my neighbor's son, a lawyer, had helped me draw up. It had taken 3 phone calls and 2 cups of chamomile tea to get through the conversation, to admit out loud what I was about to do. "Mrs. Hayes," he'd said gently, "are you sure about this? Well, it's pretty serious." "I'm sure," I'd whispered. "If I don't do this now, I'll lose him forever. Not to distance, to disrespect." He'd understood. Drew up the papers that same evening, delivered them to my door by 9 o'clock. I tucked them into that envelope and placed them on the kitchen counter, right next to where Daniel's plate would sit. At 7:15, I heard his car pull into the driveway. My heart lurched. For a moment, just a moment, I wanted to hide the envelope, pretend I hadn't spent all night plotting this confrontation. Wanted to be the mother I'd always been. Soft, forgiving, endlessly patient. But then I remembered his hand, raised, his voice cold and cruel. The look in his eyes that said I was nothing more than an ATM machine with a guilt button. I steadied myself, set the table, and waited. The front door opened without a knock. He still had his key. His footsteps were heavy, hesitant. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I could see he hadn't slept well either. His hair was messy, his eyes red-rimmed. Guilt or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. "Mom," he said quietly. I didn't turn around, just kept my back to him, flipping the last piece of bacon. "Good morning, Daniel. I made breakfast." Silence. Then, "Mom, about yesterday." "Sit down," I said, still not looking at him. "Food's getting cold." He hesitated, then moved to his usual chair at the kitchen table. The same chair he'd sat in as a boy, doing homework while I cooked dinner. The same chair where we'd celebrated his acceptance to college, his first job promotion, his engagement to Vanessa. So many memories in one piece of furniture. I carried his plate over, set it down gently in front of him. His favorite breakfast, perfect and steaming. His eyes widened slightly, confusion mixed with relief. He thought this was forgiveness. Thought the food meant everything was okay again. "Mom, I'm sorry," he started, reaching for his fork. "I was stressed and I shouldn't have." "There's something else," I said calmly, pulling out the manila envelope from behind my back. I placed it next to his plate. Daniel stared at it like it was a snake coiled on the table. "What's that?" "Open it." His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up, unsealed the flap, pulled out the papers inside. I watched his face as he read, watched the confusion turn to shock, then to disbelief. "Mom, this is an eviction notice." "Yes, it is," I said, my voice steady as stone. You're kicking me out? Of your house." His voice cracked on the last word. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly, folding my hands on the table like we were having a normal conversation about the weather. "You haven't lived here in 6 years, Daniel. But you still have a key. You still come and go like this is your home, like everything in it, including me, belongs to you." "That's not." "Let me finish." My voice was quiet, but it cut through his protests like a knife through warm butter. I'm not kicking you out of my house, son. I'm revoking your access to it. Your key, your assumed right to walk in unannounced, your belief that my home is your safety net whenever life gets hard. That ends today. He stared at me, speechless. Yesterday, you raised your hand to me. I continued, and my voice finally wavered. Maybe you didn't hit me. Maybe you stopped yourself. But the intention was there, Daniel. The threat was there. And in that moment, I realized something that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. You don't respect me anymore. Maybe you haven't for a long time. I've become a bank account to you, an obligation, something to manage and manipulate when you need something. And I let it happen. I let you take and take and take because I thought that's what love was. Endless giving without expecting anything in return. Mom, please. But I was wrong. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. Love without respect is just exploitation. And I won't be exploited anymore. Not even by my own son. Daniel's face had gone pale. The envelope trembled in his hands. So what, you're just cutting me off? Disowning me? No, I said softly. I'm teaching you something you should have learned a long time ago. That actions have consequences. That family isn't a free pass to treat people however you want. That your mother, the woman who gave you life, who sacrificed everything for you, deserves your respect, not your resentment. I stood up, walked to the counter, and picked up a small box I'd placed there earlier. Inside was his house key, along with a few photos of us from when he was young. Me holding him as a baby. The two of us at his high school graduation. His father's watch, which I'd been saving to give him someday. This is everything of yours that was still here, I said, setting the box on the table. You can take it when you leave, but the key stays with me from now on. How long? He whispered. How long are you doing this? I met his eyes. My son's eyes, which used to look at me with love and are now filled with panic. Until you remember who I am. Until you remember what family means. Until you can look me in the eye and treat me with the respect I've earned. Not as your mother, but as a human being. The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Daniel sat frozen, the eviction notice still clutched in his hands, his untouched breakfast growing cold in front of him. You should eat, I said quietly, turning away. I made it just the way you like it. He didn't eat. He sat there for 5 more minutes in complete silence, then slowly stood up, gathered the box, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back. His face was a mess of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion, and something else. Something that looked almost like respect beginning to form beneath the surface. Mom! Goodbye, Daniel, I said, my voice breaking just slightly. I love you. I always will. But love isn't enough anymore. The door closed softly behind him. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the smell of bacon and the weight of what I'd just done, and finally, I let myself cry. But even through the tears, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do is let her child fall. Because it's the only way they'll learn to stand. They say time heals all wounds. But I learned that time doesn't heal anything. It just gives you space to decide whether you want to keep bleeding or start stitching yourself back together. After I handed my son that eviction notice with his breakfast, I didn't hear from him for 3 months. 3 months of silence so loud it echoed through every room of my empty house. 3 months of wondering if I'd done the right thing, or if I'd just lost my son forever. Welcome back, dear ones. This is Grandma Alice Stories, and we've reached the final chapter of this difficult journey. Grab your tissues along with your tea, because this is where we learn that some lessons take time to sink in, and some apologies are worth waiting for. Not every story ends with revenge. Some end with something harder, growth, change, and the painful beauty of respect earned back one day at a time. The first week after Daniel left was the hardest. I'd wake up in the morning, put on the coffee, and catch myself making 2 cups instead of 1. I'd cook dinner and realize halfway through that I was making enough for 2 people. The silence in my house wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the clock reminded me that my son was gone. And this time, I was the one who'd sent him away. The doubt crept in like fog under a door. What if I was too harsh? What if this pushes him away forever? What if Vanessa turns him completely against me? My neighbor, Dorothy, came by that first Sunday, found me staring at old photo albums, crying into my coffee. She sat down beside me, put her weathered hand over mine, and said something I'll never forget. "Alice, a mother's job isn't to be loved. It's to raise a man worth loving. You did the hard thing. Now you wait and see if he's strong enough to learn from it." So I waited. I kept myself busy. Joined the community garden committee. Started volunteering at the library on Tuesdays. Reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while pouring all my energy into being available for Daniel's emergencies. Slowly, painfully, I started remembering who I was before I became just Daniel's mom. The woman who'd give anything, sacrifice everything, endure anything. I was Alice Hayes, and I deserved respect, even from my own son. 2 weeks passed, then a month. My phone stayed silent. I saw his social media posts occasionally. Dorothy's granddaughter would show me sometimes, though I'd asked her to stop. Daniel and Vanessa at restaurants. Daniel looking tired, stressed. One photo of them arguing in what looked like a parking lot, though it had been quickly deleted. I wondered if he'd told Vanessa what happened. Wondered if she was filling his head with more poison, convincing him I was the villain in this story. Then, 6 weeks after that breakfast, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store, loading my cart with the basics, bread, eggs, canned soup, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mrs. Hayes." I turned. It was Marcus, Daniel's best friend from college. They'd been close once, before Vanessa came into the picture and Daniel started dropping his old friends one by one. "Marcus," I said, genuinely happy to see him. "How are you, sweetheart?" His smile was warm but concerned. "I'm good, Mrs. Hayes, but I've been worried about Daniel. He called me a few weeks ago. First time in almost 2 years. My heart skipped. Is he okay?" Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "He's struggling. He told me what happened between you two. Not Vanessa's version, his version. The truth." He paused. "Mrs. Hayes, I think he's finally seeing things clearly. But he's scared. Scared he's ruined everything with you. Scared it's too late to fix it." I gripped my shopping cart to steady myself. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the same thing I'm going to tell you. It's never too late if the apology is real. But it has to be real, Mrs. Hayes. Not just words. Real change." We talked for a few more minutes, then parted ways. But his words stayed with me, planted like seeds in soil, waiting to see if they'd grow into something. Another month passed. Then, on a Tuesday morning in early fall, there was a knock at my door. Not the doorbell, a knock. Soft, hesitant, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they had the right to be there. I opened the door. Daniel stood on my porch, and I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven. But it was his eyes that stopped me. They were different. Softer. Broken open in a way that looked painful but necessary. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. I didn't move, didn't smile. Just stood there, hand on the doorframe, waiting. "I know I don't have the right to be here," he continued, his voice shaking slightly. "I know you told me to stay away until I learned respect. And I think I'm starting to understand what that means." "Are you?" I asked, my voice neutral. He nodded. Can we talk? Please? I'll stand out here if you want. I just need you to hear me." I studied his face for a long moment, looking for the signs I'd learned to recognize, the manipulation, the desperation that came from needing something from me. But all I saw was genuine remorse. I stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where this had all begun 3 months earlier. I made tea, just tea, nothing fancy, and waited for him to speak. "I left Vanessa," he said finally. I blinked. "What?" 2 weeks ago. I moved into Marcus's spare room. "We're getting divorced." He wrapped his hands around the mug I'd given him. After that morning, I went home and told her what happened. I thought she'd be on my side. Thought she'd agree that you were being unreasonable." And his laugh was bitter. She said, "Good. Maybe now your mother will stop being such a financial burden." "That's what she called you, Mom. A burden." His eyes filled with tears. And I realized she'd been saying things like that for years. Little comments, little digs. And I'd let her. I'd started believing them. My chest tightened. "I spent 3 months being angry at you," he continued. "Angry that you'd embarrassed me, that you'd kicked me out, that you'd chosen that moment to suddenly grow a backbone." He winced at his own words. "That's what I thought, that you'd suddenly changed. But you hadn't changed at all, Mom. I'd become someone who could raise his hand to his own mother and think she was the problem." The tears came then, streaming down his face. "I am so sorry. I'm sorry for taking your money. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for letting Vanessa poison the way I saw you. I'm sorry for becoming the kind of man who could threaten his own mother and then blame her for it." I sat very still, letting his words settle in the space between us. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said. "I don't expect you to trust me. I just needed you to know that I finally understand. Respect isn't something you give when it's convenient. It's something you show every single day, especially to the people who've earned it most." The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of his crying and my own measured breathing. Finally, I reached across the table and took his hand. "It's going to take time, Daniel," I said softly. "Trust isn't rebuilt in one conversation. Respect isn't proven with one apology. I know, but if you're willing to do the work, real work, not just words, then I'm willing to walk that road with you." He squeezed my hand, nodding through his tears. "And Daniel," I added, my voice firm, "if you ever raise your hand to me or anyone else again, there won't be a second chance. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. "I understand." That was 8 months ago. Daniel still lives with Marcus. He's in therapy now, working through the patterns that led him to that moment. We have dinner once a week. He comes over, we cook together, and we talk. Really talk. About his father. About the mistakes we've both made. About how to build something better from the rubble of what broke. He paid back every dollar he borrowed. Insisted on it, even though I told him it wasn't necessary. "It is necessary," he'd said. "You need to know I value what you gave me." Last week, he brought me flowers. Not for any special occasion. Just because. I won't lie and say everything is perfect. Some wounds take years to fully heal. But every week, I see more of the boy I raised coming back. The kind one. The respectful one. The one who understands that love without respect is just another word for taking. And me? I learned something too. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. That boundaries aren't cruel. They're sacred. That teaching someone respect, even when it breaks your heart to do it, is the greatest gift you can give them. Because the morning I served my son breakfast and justice, I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was teaching him how to be a man his father would be proud of. And in the end, that lesson was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. Because now when my son looks at me, I don't see entitlement. I see respect. And that, my dear ones, is worth more than all the apologies in the world. Never apologize for demanding the respect you've earned. And never feel guilty for teaching someone, even your own child, that love has boundaries. Because real love doesn't just give endlessly. Real love knows when to say enough. Thank you for walking this journey with me today, dear ones. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that you deserve respect no matter who's asking you to accept less, then I hope you'll stay a while longer. Subscribe to Grandma Alice Stories for more tales of life, love, justice, and the wisdom that comes from walking through fire and coming out stronger on the other side. Every story here carries a lesson. Every wound carries wisdom. And every ending, no matter how painful, can become a new beginning if we're brave enough to demand better. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment sharing your own story. And remember, you are worthy of respect. Always. Even from the people you love most. Until next time, my dear, take care of that beautiful heart of yours.